The great crystal hall stretched out like a frozen ocean under the twin suns of Vorthan Prime. Captain Jake Morrison stood at the entrance, trying not to show how amazed he was by what he saw. The walls were made of pure crystal that caught the sunlight and threw it around in dancing colors. He had never seen anything so beautiful in his life. But the beings sitting at the curved table in the center of the hall were not beautiful at all. They were alien in ways that made his skin crawl. The Zephyrian ambassador looked like a giant spider with too many eyes. The representative from the crystal people had skin that looked like broken glass. The water breathers wore suits filled with blue liquid and had faces that reminded Jake of deep-sea fish. Admiral Lisa Carter walked beside him, her military uniform crisp and clean. She kept her face blank, but Jake could see the tension in her shoulders. Behind them walked Dr. Ryan Blake, carrying a thick folder of papers about Earth and humanity. He looked nervous. They were here for one reason. Earth wanted to join the Galactic Council. After 3 years of talks and meetings, today was the day the Council would vote. Jake hoped they would say yes. Earth needed friends out here among the stars. Lord Kethtar, the spider-like Zephyrian, stood up at the council table. His voice came out in clicks and whistles, but the translator in Jake's ear turned it into words he could understand. "We have studied the humans for many cycles," Kethtar said. His many eyes looked at Jake with what seemed like disgust. "They come from a single world, a small wet rock on the edge of nowhere. They have only just learned to leave their home planet." Jake felt his face get hot with anger, but he stayed quiet. Lisa had warned him this might happen. "High Counselor," Velnara from the Crystal Hegemony spoke next. Her voice sounded like wind chimes in a storm. "The humans are violent creatures. They have spent their entire history fighting each other. Wars, murders, destruction of their own world. How can we trust such beings?" The representative from the Aquatic Federation made a sound like bubbling water. "They pollute their oceans and poison their air. They cut down their forests and kill their animals. They cannot even take care of their own planet. How can they help govern the galaxy?" Jake wanted to stand up and shout at them. Yes, humans had problems. Yes, they had made mistakes, but they were trying to do better. They had stopped most wars. They were cleaning up their planet. They were learning, but the aliens were not finished. "Look at their technology," said another voice from across the table. Jake could not see who was speaking. "Their fastest ships take months to travel between star systems. Our ships do the same journey in days. Their weapons are crude. Their computers are simple. They are like children playing with toys." Dr. Blake stepped forward. "If I may speak," he said. His voice shook a little. "Humans may be new to space travel, but we learn fast. We adapt. We solve problems in ways others might not think of." Kethtar made a sound that might have been laughter. "Adapt? You mean you stumble around until you find something that works? That is not adaptation. That is accident." The council talked for hours. Jake and his team had to stand the whole time, listening as alien after alien explained why humans were not good enough to join their club. They were too violent, too primitive, too young, too stupid. Finally, the talking stopped. The council voted. "The Galactic Council has decided," Velnara announced. Her crystal skin flashed with different colors as she spoke. "Humanity will be granted observer status only. You may watch our meetings, you may learn from us, but you may not vote. You may not speak unless asked. You may not participate in council decisions." Jake felt like someone had punched him in the stomach. Observer status was almost worse than being rejected completely. It meant they thought humans were interesting enough to watch, but not important enough to listen to. As they left the Crystal Hall, Jake heard the aliens talking among themselves. They did not bother to whisper. "Pathetic little creatures," one said. "Give them a few hundred years. Maybe they will grow up," said another. "If they do not destroy themselves first," added a third, and several others made sounds that seemed like agreement. Lisa walked faster, her jaw tight with anger. Dr. Blake looked like he might cry. Jake just felt empty inside. Back on their ship, the three humans sat in the small meeting room. The Earth flag hung on the wall behind them, looking small and lonely. Well, that went about as badly as it could, Lisa said. She had taken off her formal jacket and rolled up her sleeves. Observer status. They might as well have patted us on the head and given us candy. Dr. Blake opened his folder and spread papers across the table. There is something strange in the council records, he said. I found references to something called the Devourers, but every time I asked about them, the aliens changed the subject. Jake looked at the papers. They were covered with alien writing that he could not read. What kind of references? Battle reports from thousands of years ago. Warnings, emergency protocols. It looks like something scared them very badly once. Dr. Blake pointed to one document. This one talks about entire star systems going dark, planets stripped of all life. Lisa leaned forward. And they will not talk about it? They act like it never happened, but the records are there, hidden deep in their files. But there. Jake stared out the window at the alien ships floating around, Vorthan Prime. They were beautiful and advanced and powerful. But Dr. Blake was right. There was fear in those records. Fear of something that had almost destroyed them once. Maybe, Jake said slowly, they are not as strong as they think they are. The ship's communication system buzzed. A message from Earth Command was coming through. Jake read it and felt his heart sink even further. Earth wants a full report, he said. They want to know if we are in the Galactic Council. What do we tell them? Dr. Blake asked. Jake looked at his two companions. They had come so far and worked so hard, only to be treated like children by creatures who thought they were better than humans. We tell them the truth, he said. We tell them the galaxy thinks we are not good enough, but we also tell them we are not giving up. Maybe observer status is enough for now. Maybe we can prove them wrong. Lisa nodded. Earth has faced worse than snobbish aliens. Dr. Blake gathered up his papers. I want to keep studying these devourer references. Something tells me they might be important someday. As their ship prepared to leave Vorthan Prime, Jake took one last look at the crystal city below. Somewhere down there, the Galactic Council was probably already forgetting about the primitive humans from the small, wet planet. That was their mistake. 3 months had passed since the humans returned to Earth with news of their rejection. The sting of being called primitive still hurt, but life went on. Dr. Amanda Torres sat in the control room of humanity's newest deep space observatory, watching, screens filled with data from the far edges of the galaxy. Amanda loved her job. Every day brought new discoveries about distant stars and planets. The observatory was built on the dark side of the moon, away from Earth's bright lights and radio noise. Here, she could see deeper into space than anyone had ever seen before. That morning started like any other. Amanda sipped her coffee and checked the overnight scans. The computer had flagged several unusual readings from the galactic rim, the empty space at the very edge of known territory. At first, she thought it was just background noise. Space was full of strange signals that meant nothing. But as she looked closer, her coffee grew cold in her hands. These signals were not random. They had patterns, structure. They were artificial. Computer, analyze signal pattern Delta 7, she said. The computer's voice was calm and emotionless. Pattern shows geometric progression consistent with manufactured technology. Estimated source size, approximately 12,000 kilometers in diameter. Amanda nearly dropped her coffee cup. 12,000 kilometers. That was almost as big as Earth. Nothing that large could be natural, and nothing that large should exist. She called Dr. Blake on Earth immediately. His face appeared on her screen, looking tired. He had been working day and night on the Devourer files he had stolen from the Galactic Council. Ryan, I need you to look at something, Amanda said. I am seeing massive artificial structures coming from the galactic rim, hundreds of them. Blake's eyes went wide. Amanda, I think I know what you are seeing. The Devourers. They are real, and they are coming back. While Amanda and Blake compared their data, something terrible was happening on the other side of the galaxy. The hegemony colony of Xerion had been a peaceful world of crystal gardens and floating cities. 5 million beings lived there in harmony, creating beautiful art and studying the mysteries of the universe. Commander Steve Parker was leading a routine patrol mission near Xerion when his ship's sensors went crazy. Energy readings unlike anything he had ever seen filled his screens. Then he saw them. The ships were black and angular, like giant knives cutting through space. The smallest ones were the size of city blocks. The largest ones dwarfed entire space stations. They moved with purpose, surrounding Xerion like a pack of wolves. "All ships, this is Parker," he said into his radio. "We have unknown vessels approaching Xerion. They are not responding to communication attempts." What happened next would haunt Steve for the rest of his life. The alien ships began to glow with a sick green light. Beams of energy lanced down from space, touching the surface of Xerion. Where the beams hit, everything simply disappeared. Mountains, cities, oceans. All of it was sucked up into the waiting ships above. Steve watched in horror as an entire planet was consumed in less than 6 hours. 5 million beings died without even understanding what was killing them. When the feeding was done, the black ships moved on, leaving behind only empty space where Xerion had been. A few refugee ships managed to escape the slaughter. Steve's small patrol vessel rescued as many as they could, but there were so few survivors. Most were in shock, unable to speak about what they had witnessed. One survivor, a crystal being named Veltar, grabbed Steve's arm with a grip that was surprisingly strong. "The Devourers," he whispered. "The ancient enemy. They have returned to finish what they started." News of Xerion's destruction spread across the galaxy like wildfire. On Vorthon Prime, the Galactic Council called emergency meetings. Lord Kethatar stood before the assembled representatives, his spider-like body trembling with fear. "The reports are confirmed," he said. "Xerion is gone, completely consumed. The refugee ships describe technology beyond our understanding. Ships that can strip mine entire planets in hours." High Counselor Velnara's crystal skin flickered with nervous energy. "How many ships do they have?" "Our long-range sensors detect at least 3,000 large vessels, possibly more. They are moving toward the core worlds along predictable routes, consuming everything in their path." The council chamber filled with the sounds of fear. Clicking, whistling, bubbling voices all talking at once. Some wanted to fight, others wanted to run. None of them had any real idea what to do. "We must mobilize our combined fleets," declared Admiral Zexhan of the Aquatic Federation. "Our technology is superior. Our ships are faster and more maneuverable." "Superior to what?" asked another voice. "We have never seen weapons like theirs. We do not even understand how they work." Kethtar brought up tactical displays showing the Galactic Council's military strength. It looked impressive on paper. 12 fleets with thousands of ships, advanced energy weapons and defensive shields, battle computers that could calculate optimal strategies in microseconds. But there was a problem that none of them wanted to admit. The Galactic Council had been at peace for over 1,000 years. Their fleets were designed for patrols and peacekeeping, not for real war. Their battle tactics were theoretical, learned from computer simulations rather than actual combat. The aliens had grown soft during their long peace. They had forgotten how to fight with desperation and fury. They had forgotten that sometimes survival required more than superior technology. Meanwhile, on Earth, General Patricia Hayes was reading the reports from the Galactic Rim with growing alarm. The Devourers were real, and they were heading toward inhabited space. At their current rate of expansion, they would reach Earth in less than 2 years. Patricia had spent her entire career preparing for threats that might never come. Wars with other nations, asteroid impacts, alien invasions. Now, the worst-case scenario was actually happening, and humanity was not even considered important enough to be warned by the Galactic Council. She picked up her secure phone and called President Ellen Rodriguez. "Madam President, we have a situation. I need to brief you immediately." 2 days later, the first major battle between the Galactic Council forces and the Devourers took place in the Kethlor system. Admiral Zexhan led a combined fleet of 800 ships against a devourer force one-third that size. The battle should have been easy. The Council ships were faster and had better weapons. They outnumbered the enemy 3-1. Their battle computers had calculated a 92% chance of victory. But the devourers did not fight like the computer simulations predicted. They did not follow standard tactics or respond to logical strategies. Instead, they moved like a single organism, coordinated in ways that the Council forces could not understand or counter. Within 6 hours, Admiral Zexhan's fleet was destroyed. Less than 50 ships escaped to tell the tale. The devourers had lost only 12 vessels, and even those were quickly replaced as they consumed the wreckage of their enemies. The news of the defeat reached Earth through Dr. Blake's contacts in the Council archives. He burst into General Hayes's office without knocking, his face pale with fear. "They lost," he said. 800 ships and they lost. The devourers are stronger than anyone thought. Patricia looked at the reports Blake had brought. The tactical analysis made for grim reading. The Galactic Council's rigid battle doctrines and predictable strategies had made them easy targets for an enemy that adapted and learned from every encounter. "How long before they reach the core worlds?" she asked. "At their current rate, maybe 6 months, maybe less." Patricia stared out her office window at the busy streets of Washington, D.C. Somewhere out there, people were going about their normal lives, not knowing that an ancient enemy was devouring its way across the galaxy toward them. The Galactic Council had dismissed humanity as primitive and violent, but now those same qualities might be exactly what the galaxy needed to survive. She picked up her phone again. It was time to prepare for war. The emergency meeting room in the White House was packed with military officers and scientists. President Ellen Rodriguez sat at the head of the long table, reading reports that grew worse by the hour. 3 more star systems had gone dark in the past week. The devourers were getting closer to the galaxy's populated worlds. General Patricia Hayes stood at the front of the room, pointing to a large star map on the wall. Red marks showed where the devourers had struck. Yellow marks showed evacuated systems. Green marks showed the remaining safe zones, and there were not many of those left. "The situation is getting worse," Patricia said. "The Galactic Council has lost 4 more battles. Their fleets are retreating toward the core worlds, but they cannot stop the advance." President Rodriguez looked tired. She had been in meetings for 3 days straight, trying to figure out what Earth should do. "What about our own defenses? Can we protect Earth if they come here?" Admiral Lisa Carter, who had returned from the failed diplomatic mission months ago, shook her head. "Our orbital defense platforms might slow them down, but we have seen what their weapons can do. They consumed a Xerion in 6 hours. Xerion was much more advanced than we are." Dr. Ryan Blake had been quiet during most of the meeting, but now he spoke up. "The Galactic Council has not asked for our help. They still think we are too primitive to matter." "Then why are we even considering getting involved?" asked Secretary of Defense Robert Chen. "If they think we are useless, maybe we should focus on saving ourselves." The room fell silent. It was the question everyone was thinking, but no one wanted to ask. Earth owed the Galactic Council nothing. The aliens had rejected humanity, called them violent primitives, and refused to take them seriously. Why should humans risk their lives for beings who looked down on them? President Rodriguez stood up and walked to the star map. She stared at the red mark spreading across the galaxy like a disease. "How many people have died so far?" Dr. Blake checked his notes. "Conservative estimate? About 50 billion beings across 12 star systems." 50 billion. The president touched one of the red marks on the map. 50 billion people who had families, dreams, hopes for the future. And we are supposed to sit here and let more die because the survivors hurt our feelings? She turned to face the room. "I do not care what the Galactic Council thinks of us. I care about doing what is right. If we can help save lives, then that is what we are going to do." General Hayes smiled. It was the first time she had smiled in weeks. "What are your orders, Madam President?" "Mobilize everything we have. I want every ship that can fly armed and ready for combat. Call it Operation Prometheus. We are bringing fire to the galaxy whether they want it or not. The meeting broke up quickly after that. Officers rushed out to prepare their commands. Scientists hurried back to their labs to work on new weapons. Earth was going to war. 2 weeks later, Colonel Marcus Wright found himself commanding the strangest fleet in human history. His flagship was a converted passenger liner called the New York. His escort ships included mining vessels, cargo haulers, and even a few luxury yachts that had been fitted with weapons. It was not much to look at, but it was what Earth could spare. The real military ships had to stay home to defend the planet. Marcus would have to make do with whatever he could get. His destination was the Kepler system, where Galactic Council intelligence reported a small Devourer scouting force. It would be humanity's first real test against the ancient enemy. Lieutenant Susan Miller sat in the pilot seat of her converted cargo ship, the Boston. She had been a freight pilot before the war started, hauling supplies between Earth and the outer colonies. Now her ship carried torpedoes instead of trade goods, and she was about to face monsters from the dawn of time. "All ships, this is Colonel Wright," came the voice over the radio. "Remember your training. These things are not invincible. They can be hurt, and they can be killed. Stay flexible, stay unpredictable, and do not give them an easy target." The Devourer ships appeared on their sensors like black wounds in space. 3 of them, each the size of a small city. They moved with mechanical precision, following predictable patrol patterns around a dead asteroid field. Marcus smiled. Predictable was good. Predictable meant he could plan for what they would do next. All ships begin attack pattern Delta. Use the asteroids for cover and hit them from unexpected angles. The human fleet scattered like leaves in the wind. Unlike the rigid formations favored by Galactic Council forces, the humans moved in chaotic patterns that looked random, but were actually carefully coordinated. Susan dove her ship behind a large asteroid, waiting for the right moment. The Devourers were scanning the asteroid field with energy beams looking for hidden enemies. But they were looking in the wrong places. "Now," Marcus ordered. 20 human ships opened fire at once from 20 different directions. Missiles and energy bolts converged on the lead Devourer ship. Its shields flared and sparked, but held. The Devourers responded exactly as Marcus had expected. They turned toward the largest concentration of attacking ships, focusing their attention on what seemed like the main threat. It was a logical response, and it was exactly the wrong thing to do. While the Devourers were distracted, Susan and 5 other ships moved into position behind them. They were flying old cargo haulers and mining ships, nothing that looked dangerous. The Devourers ignored them completely. "Fire," Susan whispered, and launched her entire payload of torpedoes at point-blank range. The explosions lit up space like a new sun. The Devourer ship staggered, its rear section torn open and bleeding. Atmosphere. For the first time in the war, one of the ancient destroyers had been seriously damaged. The other 2 Devourer ships immediately changed their tactics, abandoning their predictable patterns and moving in ways the humans had never seen before. But Marcus was ready for that too. "They are learning," he told his fleet. "Good. That means they are not perfect. All ships pattern Gamma. Make them chase shadows." The human ships began a deadly game of hide-and-seek among the asteroids. They would appear, fire a few shots, then disappear again before the Devourers could respond effectively. It was not the kind of battle the aliens were used to fighting. Galactic Council forces fought with honor and according to established rules. They formed neat battle lines and exchanged fire in organized patterns. The Devourers had learned to counter those tactics over the millennia. But humans fought like the predators they had once been on the African plains. They used cunning and deception. They attacked from ambush and retreated when the odds turned against them. They had no honor in battle, only the desperate need to survive. It worked. After 6 hours of running combat, the damaged Devourer ship finally exploded in a brilliant fireball. The other 2 ships, apparently deciding that this enemy was too troublesome to bother with, jumped to hyperspace and fled. Colonel Wright looked at his tactical display in amazement. They had won. Humanity had faced the Devourers in battle and won. "All ships, report casualties," he ordered. New York, no casualties. Boston, minor hull damage, no injuries. Chicago, 2 wounded, not serious. One by one, his ships reported in. Out of 20 vessels, they had lost only 1 ship and suffered fewer than 30 casualties. By comparison, the Galactic Council had been losing hundreds of ships and thousands of crew members in every engagement. The news of humanity's victory spread across the galaxy faster than light-speed communications. For the first time since the war began, someone had beaten the Devourers decisively, not just survived an encounter, but actually destroyed one of their ships and forced the others to retreat. On Vorthon Prime, High Counselor Velnara read the battle reports with disbelief. The primitive humans with their crude ships and simple weapons had accomplished what the galaxy's most advanced fleets could not. How is this possible? She asked Lord Kethtar. The spider-like alien studied the tactical analysis with all of his. They fight differently than we do. Chaotically. Unpredictably. The Devourers cannot anticipate their moves because their moves make no logical sense. No logical sense? They sacrifice tactical advantage for strategic surprise. They retreat when they should advance, attack when they should defend. By all military theory, they should lose every battle, but they do not lose. No, they do not lose. Velnara's crystal skin flickered with what might have been hope. Contact Admiral Carter immediately. The Galactic Council formally requests human military assistance. 3 months after being dismissed as primitive and violent, humanity had proven that sometimes the galaxy needed primitives who remembered how to be violent. The Devourers had awakened to find that their ancient enemy had evolved new champions, and those champions were not going to give up without a fight. The message arrived at Earth Command 3 days after the victory at Kepler. Admiral Lisa Carter read it twice before believing what she was seeing. The Galactic Council, the same beings who had called humans primitive and violent, were formally requesting military assistance. General Patricia Hayes laughed when Lisa showed her the message. It was not a happy laugh. So now they want our help, after they treated us like children. The question is, do we help them? Lisa asked. Patricia looked out her office window at the busy streets below. People were going about their normal lives, not knowing that the fate of the galaxy was being decided in rooms like this one. Of course we help them, not because they deserve it, but because 50 billion people are already dead and more will die if we do nothing. Within a week, human military advisors were being sent to 3 core worlds. The Galactic Council had swallowed their pride and agreed to let primitive humans teach them how to fight. Captain Daniel Foster found himself on Centauri Prime, working with Fleet Commander Velshan of the Zephyrian Defense Force. The spider-like alien towered over Daniel, his 8 legs clicking nervously on the metal floor of the command center. Your tactics make no sense, Velshan said, studying the battle plans Daniel had prepared. You want our ships to scatter instead of maintaining formation. You want us to retreat when we have superior numbers. This goes against everything we have learned about warfare. Daniel had been expecting this reaction. Every alien commander he had worked with said the same thing. Tell me, Commander, how many battles have you won against the Devourers using traditional tactics? Velshan's mandibles clicked, and what Daniel had learned was embarrassment. We have not won any battles. Then maybe it is time to try something that makes no sense. The real problem was not just tactics. It was the way the aliens thought about war itself. They had been at peace for so long that they had forgotten what real combat felt like. They treated battles like mathematical problems to be solved with the right equations. Humans knew better. War was chaos and confusion and fear. It was about making quick decisions with incomplete information. It was about being willing to lose some battles in order to win the war. On Aquatica 7, Dr. Rachel Stone was working with a team of alien engineers to develop new weapons. The blue-skinned Aquatic Federation scientists were brilliant, but they thought too much and acted too little. The quantum disruption device is theoretically sound, said Chief Engineer Polnix, his gills fluttering with excitement, but we need more time to test it properly. Perhaps 6 months of simulations. Rachel shook her head. We do not have 6 months. The Devourers will be here in weeks. Sometimes you have to build something and hope it works. But what if it fails? Then, we try something else. That is how humans have always done things. We fail fast and learn faster. Rachel's plan was ambitious and dangerous. The Devourers seemed to communicate through quantum entanglement networks that connected all their ships across vast distances. If she could disrupt those networks, even temporarily, it might give the Allied fleets a chance to win some battles. The problem was that the disruption devices had to be placed in multiple star systems at exactly the same time. It would require precise coordination and the willingness to send ships on what were essentially suicide missions. Commander Alex Brown volunteered to lead one of those missions. His target was a Devourer stronghold in the Rigel system, deep in enemy territory. His chances of survival were less than 10%, and everyone knew it. "You do not have to do this," General Hayes told him during the mission briefing. "We can find another way." Alex shook his head. "No, we cannot. This is our best shot at turning the war around. If my ship can get close enough to plant the disruption device, it might save millions of lives. And if you do not make it back?" Alex smiled. It was a sad smile, but also determined. "Then make sure my death counts for something." 3 days later, Operation Shattered Mirror began. 50 ships from 6 different species launched coordinated strikes across 12 star systems. Most of the ships were human vessels, crewed by volunteers who knew they probably would not come home. Alex's ship, the Philadelphia, jumped into the Rigel system along with 2 escort vessels. What they found there was worse than anyone had imagined. The Devourers had turned the entire system into a massive factory, using the raw materials from consumed planets to build new ships. Hundreds of Devourer vessels patrolled the system. Getting close enough to plant the disruption device seemed impossible, but Alex had not come this far to give up. "All ships, begin evasive maneuvers. Make them think we are just another scouting mission." The Philadelphia and her escorts moved through the outer system, dodging patrols and hiding behind asteroids. Alex's crew worked in complete silence, knowing that any mistake could give them away. It took 8 hours to reach the target location, a massive Devourer command ship that seemed to be coordinating the entire operation. The ship was the size of a small moon, covered in weapons and sensors. "Torpedo loaded with the disruption device," reported Lieutenant Jenny Walsh from the weapons station. "We will have to get within 500 kilometers for the device to work." 500 kilometers. Close enough that the Devourer ships' defensive weapons would cut them to pieces long before they could escape. But there was no other choice. "Take us in," Alex ordered. The Philadelphia accelerated toward the command ship, her engines running at maximum power. Alarm bells started ringing as Devourer sensors detected the approaching vessel. Energy beams reached out like angry fingers, trying to swat the small human ship. Alex threw his ship into a wild spiral, dodging between the beams by inches. His pilot training had never prepared him for anything like this, but he had grown up playing video games that taught him to think fast and react faster. 400 kilometers, Jenny called out. 300, 200. A energy beam grazed the Philadelphia's hull, tearing away armor plating and causing systems to spark and fail. But the ship kept flying. 100 kilometers. Firing now. The torpedo launched from the Philadelphia's single tube, carrying Rachel's disruption device toward the Devourer command ship. For a moment, nothing happened. Then space itself seemed to twist and bend as the device activated. The effect was immediate and devastating. Across 12 star systems, Devourer ships suddenly lost contact with each other. Their coordinated movements became confused and erratic. Ships that had been working together for thousands of years suddenly could not communicate. On Centauri Prime, Captain Foster watched his tactical display in amazement as the Devourer fleet attacking the system began to fall apart. Ships collided with each other. Formations broke down into chaos. For the first time in the war, the ancient enemy looked vulnerable. "All ships attack now while they are confused," he ordered the Zephyrian fleet. Commander Velshan hesitated for only a moment. Then his training kicked in, and he began issuing orders in the rapid, clicking language of his people. The Zephyrian Ships surged forward, no longer following rigid battle formations but moving in the chaotic patterns that Daniel had taught them. The battle was still fierce. Even confused and disorganized, the Devourers were dangerous opponents. But for the first time, the Allied forces had a real advantage. They could adapt to changing conditions faster than their enemies could. When the fighting was over, the Allied fleet had won its first major victory. 17 Devourer ships had been destroyed, with only 4 Allied vessels lost. It was the kind of casualty ratio that had seemed impossible just weeks before. Similar victories were happening across the galaxy. Human-led fleets were destroying Devourer forces that had seemed unstoppable. The tide of the war was finally turning, but the victory came at a terrible cost. Of the 50 ships that participated in Operation Shattered Mirror, only 12 made it home. Alex Brown and the crew of the Philadelphia were not among the survivors. When General Hayes received the casualty reports, she sat alone in her office for a long time. 38 ships and over 2,000 brave souls had given their lives to give the galaxy a chance at survival. On Vorthon Prime, the Galactic Council met in emergency session. Lord Kethtar stood before the assembled representatives, his usual arrogance replaced by something that looked almost like respect. "The human strategy has succeeded beyond our most optimistic projections," he announced. "Devourer forces are in retreat across 6 sectors. For the first time since this war began, we are winning." High Counselor Velnara's crystal skin flickered with colors that Daniel had learned meant gratitude. The Galactic Council votes unanimously to grant humanity full membership and to place human commanders in charge of all military operations for the remainder of this conflict. It had taken an ancient enemy and a galaxy-threatening war, but finally humanity had earned the respect of the stars. The price had been high, but sometimes that was what it took to save everyone. 6 months after Operation Shattered Mirror, Admiral Lisa Carter stood on the bridge of her flagship, watching the final battle of the war unfold on her screens. The last Devourer stronghold was a massive fortress built inside a hollowed-out planet in the Omega sector. It had taken 3 months to fight their way here, but now the end was finally in sight. The combined fleet surrounding the fortress was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. Human ships flew alongside Zephyrian cruisers and Crystal Hegemony battleships. Aquatic Federation vessels moved in formation with ships from a dozen other species. All of them followed human battle plans and human commanders. "All units, this is Admiral Carter," Lisa said into her communicator. "Begin final assault. Remember what we have learned. Stay flexible, stay unpredictable, and watch out for each other." The fleet moved forward like a storm made of metal and energy. The Devourer fortress responded with every weapon it had, filling space with deadly beams and explosive shells, but the Allied ships danced between the attacks, using techniques that no military academy had ever taught. Captain Jake Morrison, now commanding his own ship after years of combat experience, led a squadron of mixed vessels through a gap in the fortress defenses. His wing included 2 human destroyers, a Zephyrian heavy cruiser, and 3 Crystal Hegemony fighters. A year ago, these species could barely talk to each other without arguing. Now they fought together like they had been doing it their whole lives. War had a way of teaching cooperation faster than any diplomacy. The battle lasted 18 hours. When it was over, the last Devourer fortress was a cloud of glowing debris, and the ancient enemy was finally defeated. The galaxy was safe. 3 weeks later, representatives from every species in the galaxy gathered on Vorthon Prime for the victory celebration. The crystal halls that had once echoed with dismissive comments about primitive humans now rang with cheers and applause as President Ellen Rodriguez took the stage. She looked out at the assembled crowd and felt a mixture of pride and sadness. Pride for what humanity had accomplished. Sadness for all the lives that had been lost along the way. "We gather today not just to celebrate victory but to remember sacrifice," she began. "This war cost us greatly. Entire star systems were lost. Billions of beings died. We must never forget the price that was paid for our freedom." In the front row, Lord Kethtar and High Counselor Velnara listened with what passed for shame on their alien faces. They had learned the hard way that strength came in many forms, And sometimes the most powerful warriors looked nothing like what you expected. But from this tragedy, something beautiful has emerged, the president continued. We have learned that our differences make us stronger, not weaker. Humanity's chaos and the galaxy's order, working together, created something neither could achieve alone. General Patricia Hayes stepped forward to receive the galaxy's highest military honor, the Star of Eternal Peace. It was the first time in galactic history that the award had been given to someone from a species that was not even a council member. When the war began, Patricia accepted the crystal medal but used her speech to honor the thousands of humans who had died in the war. She read their names one by one, while the vast hall sat in respectful silence. Alex Brown, Jenny Walsh, the crews of the Philadelphia, the Boston, the Chicago. Heroes who had given everything for worlds they had never seen and people they had never met. Dr. Ryan Blake, now the galaxy's leading expert on ancient threats, presented his final report to the reformed Galactic Council. His analysis would become required reading in military academies across 100 worlds. The Devourer War taught us that evolution never stops, he explained. While some species evolved beyond conflict, humanity retained the capacity for strategic thinking under pressure. We kept our predator instincts sharp while developing the technology to use them effectively. But why? Asked a young Aquatic Federation officer. Why did humans remain warriors when other species found peace? Blake smiled. Because Earth never let us forget that the universe is dangerous. We had natural disasters, hostile environments, and limited resources. We had to fight to survive every single day. That struggle made us strong. The new Galactic Defense Force was officially established with its headquarters on Earth. The choice was not random. Earth was centrally located, heavily defended, and, most importantly, it was home to the species that had saved the galaxy. Colonel Marcus Wright, promoted to general after his victories against the Devourers, became the first Supreme Commander of Galactic Defense. His job was to make sure that if another ancient enemy ever awakened, the galaxy would be ready. We cannot let ourselves become soft again, he told his staff during their first planning meeting. Peace is precious, but it must be protected by those who remember how to fight. The new defense doctrine was revolutionary. Instead of the rigid formations and predictable tactics that had failed against the Devourers, the galactic military would train in human-style warfare, flexibility over formality, adaptation over adherence to rules. Young officers from every species came to Earth to study at the new war college. They learned lessons that their peaceful civilizations had forgotten: how to think like a predator, how to turn weakness into strength, how to fight when all hope seemed lost. But the most important lesson was the one that humanity had always known. Sometimes the only way to protect peace was to be willing to destroy it. Sometimes saving lives required taking them. It was an ugly truth, but it was still the truth. Years passed and the galaxy prospered under the protection of the Galactic Defense Force. Trade flourished between species that had once barely tolerated each other. Art and science reached new heights as different cultures shared their knowledge. But in the deep space monitoring stations, human technicians kept watch on the galactic rim. Dr. Amanda Torres, now director of the Early Warning Network, never forgot what she had seen in those first terrifying scans. The universe was vast and full of mysteries, and not all of them were friendly. On quiet nights when the monitoring stations detected nothing but background radiation and distant starlight, Amanda sometimes wondered what other ancient enemies might be sleeping in the dark between galaxies. What other tests might be waiting for the species of the Milky Way. But then she would remember the courage of Alex Brown and the Philadelphia. She would think about the determination of Lisa Carter and Patricia Hayes. She would recall how a galaxy that had dismissed humanity as primitive had learned to trust them with their very survival. The Galactic Council had overlooked humanity's strength because they had forgotten what real strength looked like. They thought it was about having the biggest ships or the most advanced weapons. But real strength was about heart. It was about the willingness to sacrifice for others. It was about never giving up, even when the odds seemed impossible. Humanity, had reminded the galaxy of these truths when they needed them most. And if the dark ever returned, if new threats emerged from the spaces between stars, the galaxy would be ready. They had learned their lesson. They would never overlook humanity's strength again. In the halls of the Galactic Council, where human ambassadors now sat as equals among the stars, a simple plaque hung on the wall. It bore the names of every human who had died in the Devourer, War, along with a single line of text. They fought not for glory but for tomorrow. The galaxy would remember.